भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaste, hello friends. As a part of celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we ran a podcast series called Bharat Ki Kahani Meenakshi Lekhi Ki Zubani. 75 stories for 75 days run up to India's 75th Independence Day. Now, these stories, which were earlier available on the website of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Spotify and various other platforms, will now be available to Namo app virtual meet as Bharat Ki Kahani Meenakshi Lekhi Ki Zubani. Happy listening, keep listening, and stay tuned to Namo app. It's an initiative of Namo app volunteers. I thank them all through you.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां। मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaste, Namaskar. Today I have come to you with the story of Veer Surendra Sai, an exceptional freedom fighter from the state of Orissa. The doctrine of lapse was a policy of annexation initiated by Lord Dalhousie. According to this doctrine, any princely state which was under the suzerainty of the East India Company would have its princely status abolished if the king was incompetent or died without an heir. It was customary that only a male child could be the heir to the throne. In whichever state the king did not have a child, or particularly a male child, it became a normal practice to adopt a male child and declare him the heir apparent. But the British authorities refused to accept this practice. There were many ruling families in India between 1800 and 1858 who were affected by this doctrine. To name a few, royal families in the state of Satara, Arcot, Assam, Bhagat, Nagpur and Jhansi were badly affected by this. The doctrine of lapse was an easy pretext adopted by the British to annex states, especially those which were either rich in natural resources or were close to ports or were at strategic locations holding high political value. The doctrine was highly objectionable to many rulers who picked up arms against the British for this reason alone. One such state which was massively impacted by the doctrine was Sambalpur in Orissa. King Madhukar Sai ruled Orissa from 1820 to 1827. He was the fourth king of the Chauhan dynasty which ruled the western region of Orissa. As the king died without an heir, his wife Rani Mohan Kumari was put on the throne by the British. The queen was not accepted as the ruler by the local people. One, because it was a practice to put the male child on the throne, and two, that the queen would only act as a regent looking after the administration of the kingdom if the child was a minor. But in this case, there was no male child who would with the time ascend the throne. Secondly, very high taxes were also imposed on the people of Sambalpur, which made life difficult for them. The Gond and the Binjal tribal zamindars were highly dissatisfied by the revenue policy adopted by the queen. It was believed that the queen was a mere puppet in the hands of the British and she had not much say in the administration of the state. People opposed the rule of the queen. While the queen was being supported by Veer Surendra Sai, who was a direct descendant in the royal family and sixth in line to ascend the throne, staked his claim to the throne. The British, instead of Surendra Sai, appointed Narayan Singh as the king of Sambalpur in 1833. The British refused to accept the right of inheritance of Surendra Sai. This move of the British was not just liked by the people of Sambalpur. The reigns of both Rani Mohan Kumari and Narayan Singh were highly unpopular as rents were increased manifold and taxes were steep, which led to great suffering of the masses. Surendra Sai, who was born on 23rd January 1809 in Kinda village, 20 km from Sambalpur, was one of the 7 children of Dharma Singh. He was all of 18 years when he picked up arms against the British. Surendra Sai brought together the tribals and zamindars of Kinda, Barapali, Sonpur, Gontias to revolt against the present regime. As people were unhappy with the rule of Narayan Singh, a rebellion broke out. Surendra Sai and his close zamindar associates created many disturbances. In an encounter with the British, Surendra Sai, his brother Udyanta Sai and their uncle Balram Singh were captured and kept in Hazaribagh jail in 1840 for killing the father and son of Durjaya Singh, the only zamindar who supported the rule of Narayan Singh, and through that the British Balram Singh died in captivity in Hazaribagh. In 1849, when Narayan Singh died, he actually left without leaving behind a male heir. By virtue of the doctrine of lapse, the kingdom of Sambalpur was annexed by the British. As the country was up in arms against the British and revolts were taking place in different parts of the country, the sepoys set free Surendra Sai and his brother Udyanta Sai from Hazaribagh jail. Both the brothers escaped to Sambalpur. Surendra Singh, who was trained in guerrilla warfare and horsemanship, was declared their leader by the rebels. In Sambalpur, he acquired a force of 1,500 men and took to guerrilla warfare from 1857 to 1862. Despite strong opposition from the British, Surendra Sai continued his resistance to free Sambalpur from the British rule. All the British resources were pitched against Surendra Sai, who was master in his guerrilla art and was a brilliant swordsman. The British imperialists put in action their best British general, Major Foster, and Captain L. Smith, who were deputed in Sambalpur to suppress the rebellion. However, all attempts made by the British failed. Surendra Sai succeeded in foiling the strategy of the British for a long time. The British seized the entire food stock of Surendra Sai and stopped the supply of food and other necessities for life. Villages after villages, wherever British thought that Surendra Sai could be hiding, were burned down. Even those people and villages were not spared who refused to divulge the whereabouts of Surendra Sai and his group of rebels. In 1864, Surendra Sai was finally caught by the British with the help of a spy who betrayed the camp of the rebels. Expecting opposition from the tribals, Surendra Sai was transferred to Asirgarh Fort and kept in prison for the next 20 years. Living in captivity, Surendra Sai lost his eyesight and breathed his last on 28 February 1884. It was because of the revolt led by Surendra Sai that large parts of western Odisha and Sambalpur remained out of British control for the longest period of time. Surendra Sai espoused the cause of tribals and Sambalpur and fought for their rights and culture. People of the region affectionately called him Veera or Veer for his heroic acts. Odisha remembers Surendra Sai with great pride. For them, he was a brave heart who led the valiant struggle against the British but remains an unsung hero till date. He is one of the greatest revolutionaries who fought the British prior to 1857, the first war of India's independence. In 2005, the statue of Veer Surendra Sai was installed in the Parliament of India. The Government of India has released a postal stamp in his honor and the stadium of Sambalpur is named after him. On 1st November 2018, the airport was renamed after the famed freedom fighter Veer Surendra Sai by the cabinet. Let us recall the contribution of the greats like him who contributed significantly to the Indian freedom movement. 35 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Vanakkam, Namaste. Hello friends. Many years ago, a brave Indian revolutionary named Subramanya Bharatiya was born in chaste land of Bharatvarsh on 11th of December 1882. He was fondly referred as Mahakavi by the Tamilians. He was born to well-educated parents, Chinnaswamy Subramanya Iyer and Lakshmi Amal, in the village of Ithayapuram. This was a Brahmin family. His father would keep deep interest in imparting worldly wisdom to Bharati. During his childhood, Mahakavi Bharati was fascinated at reading books of various kinds and also loved to write about different things. His friends and family used to look at him as a scholarly figure because of his dedication to education. But at a very tender age of 5, he lost his mother, and when he just turned 16, his father too passed away. This was pretty challenging for young Bharati, yet he did not break apart for the kind of mental strength he built since his childhood. Since a very young age, Bharati was well versed in poetry and music and proficient in Sanskrit, Telugu, Hindi, English, French, and Arabic. Because of this dexterity, the then king of Ithayapuram gave him the title of Bharati. That means the one who is blessed by goddess Saraswati, when he was just 11. In the meanwhile, when he attained the age of 15, Bharati got married to Chelamma and later had 2 beautiful children. Finally, Subramanya attended the MDT Hindu College in Tirunelveli to finish his studies. Bharati would pursue many jobs in his lifetime. In the starting around 1901 his career, Bharati was chosen to work in the king's court as a poet in his village. His skillful writing was praised much during that time. Around 1904, he was a school teacher. During this time, he spent long hours in reading about freedom movements and about various revolutionaries that ignited a spark in his mind to contribute to the freedom movement. As days were passing by, he was brewing with hatred against the British, who were tormenting the citizens of India. He started to write various articles in journals against the unsparing British and finally landed up the role of a journalist in Swadesh Mitran, which was a Tamil daily during 1904. Later, around 1906, Mahakavi Bharati also started working for Tamil weekly called India and an English newspaper called Bala Bharatam, as well as contributed to the Hindu, Vijaya, Chakravartini, etc. He was extremely bold when it came to writing against the British government, and nobody could move him from his mountain-like strong determination to write against them. He wrote numerous articles and columns against the British that included fiery songs kindling patriotism in the minds of the citizens of his nation during the freedom struggle. A thinker like him did not just limit his work to freedom-related write-ups, but also fought for the emancipation of women, against child marriage, ardently opposed the caste system, and stood for reforming society and religion. He also did much for the Dalit communities in his region. During his stay in Varanasi, he was highly inspired by Hindu spirituality and nationalism. He met a few Sikhs there and they became good friends. He got inspired by them and changed his outward appearance and grew a beard as well as wore a turban due to his admiration for Sikhs, and continued to remain looking like that. Later, he also became the assistant editor of the Swadesh Mitran. That disturbed the British as they read many details against them which were forbidden from getting published. But on the other hand, the articles written by him inspired several citizens to raise voice against the atrocities of the British. Bharati's creativity began to peak during 1907. He started to publish his nationalistic views through hymns to poetries. Also wrote about spiritual topics like contemplations on the relationship between God and man to nationalistic songs regularly. His songs even appeared on various Tamil movies. Every single piece of his writing was ruining the peace of the British. Finally, for Bharati's nationalistic writings, many young citizens got inspired and started to launch surprise attacks on the British officials at various places out of anger against their torture. The ruthless British then launched a search to arrest Bharati, but on anticipating the same, he swiftly escaped to French-ruled Pondicherry or Puducherry to evade arrest. While living there, Bharati edited and published in weekly journals The India and Vijaya, which were banned in India in 1909 by the British to suppress his nationalist outputs. During that time, Subramanya Bharati was heavily influenced by Vedic literature, and his works were progressive and followed a reformist ideal. Some of his best books are Kuili Pattu, Panchali Satpatham, and Kannan Pattu. He also translated Vedic hymns and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra as well as Bhagavad Gita to Tamil. But after returning to the land of British-ruled India, he was arrested quickly, and after his imprisonment in 1920, Bharati was left to extreme poverty-stricken life, which took a massive toll on his health. He was brutally tortured by monstrous British police within the jail. He was struggling immensely to feed himself, and that destroyed his health. In the meanwhile, Bharati got attached to an elephant that he used to feed, which got fired up and attacked him during one of these feeding sessions in Parthasarathi temple in Triplicane, Chennai. Bharati was gravely injured by this attack and succumbed to his injuries on 12 September 1921. He was just 38 years old. The Government of India in 1987 instituted a National Subramaniam Bharati Award along with Ministry of Human Resource Development annually conferred on writers of outstanding works in Hindi literature. In 1982, Bhartiyar University, a state university, was established at Coimbatore. There is a statue of Bhartiyar at Marina Beach and also in the Indian Parliament. Many roads in the country have been named after him. The notable ones are Bhartiyar Road in Coimbatore and Subramaniam Bharati Road in New Delhi. The NGO Sevalya runs the Mahakavi Bhartiyar Higher Secondary School. We have not and will never forget about the contributions of Mahakavi Bharati. As we remember a determined thinker, a great poet like him today, we would like to dedicate the following lines to his life. Merciless criticism and independent thinking are two traits of revolutionary thinking. Lovers, lunatics, and poets are made of the same stuff, as said and spoken by Bhagat Singh. 34 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaskaram, hello friends. Today I bring to you the story of an 18th century valiant chieftain from Panchalan Kurchi, Veerapandya Kattabomman, who refused to align with the British and single-handedly waged war against them. While the first war of independence is considered to have been fought in 1857, but Veerapandya fought the war 6 decades prior to it. Veerapandya was born to Jagaveera Kattabomman and Urumagal Thammal on 3rd January 1760. He had 2 younger brothers, Dalavai Kumarasamy and Durai Singham. Veerapandya was fondly called Kuruthaiya, the Black Prince. Dalavi was called Sivathaiya, the White Prince, and Durai Singham was nicknamed Umaidurai, the Mute Prince. Kattabommu's ancestors were skilled fighters who belonged to Thogalavar community. They migrated from Andhra Pradesh to settle in Slikakulam as they wished to safeguard their culture and avoid marital alliance with the invaders. The first family of Kattabommu was appointed as the chief guard of Jagavira Pandyan, who ruled Veerapandiyapuram. With trusted service, bravery, and fighting capability, he soon gained the confidence of the king. As the king had no heir, the brave minister Bommu ascended the throne. This time, this clan of rulers came to be known as Kottaboman. During one of the hunting trips in the dense forest of Srikakulam, one of the Kottaboman rulers saw a hare chasing 7 hounds. Kottaboman was surprised to see this rare chase, believing that the land possessed great powers, which would instill courage in people. He built a fort, called it Panchalankurichi, in the memory of King Pancha Pandyan, who was the grandfather of King Jagavira Pandyan. The fort was 500 feet in length and 300 feet in breadth, and 12 feet high walls. It was made of black clay mixed with straw of paddy, maize and corn, which could withstand any attack except cannons and tanks. The fort was surrounded with thorny bale bushes. On 2nd February 1790, at the age of 30, Veerapandya became the king of Panchalankurchi, which comprised of 96 villages. Veerapandya was the 5th ruler from Kottaboman clan. He was a devotee of Lord Muruga and goddess Jakamma. He constructed 45 bell towers which were played during puja. A lover of art, he often organized dance and music festivals. After the collapse of Vijayanagar Empire in the 16th century, its governors declared themselves independent and established their own kingdoms. The old Pandya kingdom was governed by Naika rulers in Madurai, who divided the kingdom into 72 palayams. These palayams were feudal lords who administered the territories, collected tax, ran the local judiciary, and maintained the battalion of troops for the Naika ruler. Thus, the job was a mix of military governance and civil administration. As the English East India Company started wrestling for power in the region, it came into conflict with Palayams on the question of who would collect taxes. The East India Company wanted to control Palayams to secure their rights and collect taxes. The Nayak rulers who controlled West Tamil Nadu came to an abrupt end after 2 centuries. In 1736, Chanda Sahib of Arcot seized the throne of Madurai from its queen in an act of treason. Chanda Sahib was later killed in the Karnataki War, and the entire territory came under the control of the Nawab of Arcot. The Palayams of Old Madurai refused to recognize the new Nawab as a ruler, as the new Nawab of Arcot was driven to bankruptcy because he indulged in lavish expenditure and building palaces and expensive lifestyle. To meet his expenditure, the Nawab resorted to huge borrowing from the British East India Company. It was considered a big scandal which led to a discussion in the British Parliament. The Nawab of Arcot finally gave the British the right to levy and collect taxes in lieu of his borrowings. Though the agreement ended in 1785, the English demanded the right to continue the collection of taxes. As the Nawab was under severe debt, he quietly watched his people getting looted by the British in the garb of tax collection. The East India Company took advantage of the situation and mercilessly plundered the wealth of the region. The British went ahead and leased the area to a savage warrior, Muhammad Yusuf Khan, who killed many people. Many of the small principalities surrendered under pressure except Veerapandya. Veerapandya not only denied paying the taxes due to him by the British but also refused to meet Jackson, the collector of the East India Company. The British had established cordial relations in the region. The other chieftain advised Veerapandya to ally with the British and live life peacefully. Young Veerapandya refused to relent and resisted all forms of pressure from the British. After a long dialogue, he finally met Jackson at Ramalinga Vilasam, the palace of Sitapati. The meeting turned violent and ended in a skirmish in which Clark, the deputy commandant of the company, was killed. The British administration ordered an inquiry, and the truth of ill treatment meted out to Veerapandya at the hands of Jackson came to light. An order was issued for the release of Thanapatai Pillai, the minister of Veerapandya. Jackson was dismissed from service and sent back to Britain. On 16th March 1799, Lusington, the new collector of Tirunelveli, called on Veera Pandya for a meeting. Veera Pandya knew that the agenda of the meeting was payment of dues. Veera Pandya demanded the return of wealth which was looted by the British company. Lusington indicated that even if Veera Pandya did not call on him, the taxes should be paid, which was flatly refused. Lusington wrote to the British administration about the denial of payment with recommendation of war against Veera Pandya. As fight broke out, the British army stood at the four gates of Panchalang-Kurchi, fought under Major Bannerman. Lieutenant Collins was put in charge of Southern Gate. Veera Pandya launched the attack from the south and killed the British commander, Lieutenant Collins, suffering heavy losses. The British called for additional force and ammunition. The British also sent a message to Veera Pandya seeking unconditional surrender. To this, Veera Pandya replied, "We are sons of these soils. We live with dignity and shall die for the prestige, honor and dignity of our land. We do not bow before the foreign invaders. We will fight until death." Veera Pandya knew that the fort would crumble under the attack of cannon, artillery, and heavy shelling. So he decided to vacate the fort in the night. The British announced a bounty on Veera Pandya, prompting many chieftains to rebel. Thanapati Pillai and 16 Veera Pandya's men were taken prisoners. Thanapati Pillai was executed and his head was perched on a bamboo pole. To demoralize Veera Pandya, Soundra Pandian Nayak, another rebel leader, was brutally put to death. His brain was dashed against a village wall. Veera Pandya went from place to place seeking refuge. While he was residing in the palace of Kolarpatti Zamidar at Rajagopala, the forces of Itappa Naikar surrounded him. Veera Pandya and his aides fled and took refuge in Thirukolambur forest, which was under the king of Pudukottai. When the British learnt about the escape, they ordered Pudukottai to trace Veera Pandya and hand him to the British or else face terrible consequences. Fearing death, the king of Pudukottai ordered a search. On 24 September 1799, Veera Pandya was arrested and handed over to the British. Veera Pandya was sent to Kayathar jail. A trial was ordered on 16 October 1799. The British invited local zamidars to witness the proceedings. The trial was fabricated in favor of the British. Veera Pandya boldly argued for freedom of his kingdom and accused the British of their illegal occupation. The British said, "If you seek pardon, we will set you free." Kodaboman did not yield, instead said, "Do what you want to do, you cowards." Veera Pandya was awarded death punishment. Veera Pandya's end came on 16th October 1799 when he was hung on a tamarind tree at Kayathar near Tirunelveli. Others who were hanged along with Veera Pandya were Veeragechian Naichar, Dali Ithalappa, Nagalpuram Puttur, Veerapachi Sivagangai. Veera Pandya's brother Umaidura was imprisoned. After the death of the brave warriors, the English soldiers plundered the region. Few years later, the land of the captured fort was ploughed and castor oil crop was sowed so that it can no longer be inhabited. The traitor Itappan was conferred with the title of Raja by the East India Company. With time, the bravery of Veera Pandya Kottaboman and his men was narrated as folklore, and till date it is celebrated through legends and epic poetry in Tamil Nadu. In 1974, a memorial was built in his memory inside the fort, which was beautiful paintings depicting his heroic deeds. The remnants of the old fort is preserved by Archaeological Survey of India. Another memorial was built at the place where Veera Pandya was hanged. A postal stamp was also issued by the government. The state transport bus playing from Kanyakumari to Tirunelveli is called Kottaboman Transport Corporation. This is to keep alive the memory of great warrior in the mind of the younger generation. Veera Pandya is recognized as one of the earliest freedom fighters. He is hailed as the inspiration for the first war of independence in southern India. 33 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Namaskar. Hello friends. Today I bring to you a story from the heart of Bengal. This story is about Preeti Lata Varedar, inspired by the Rani of Jhansi and her courage to fight against the British. Preeti Lata initially faced opposition from revolutionaries when she wanted to join the freedom struggle. Her training in making bombs and her exceptional courage did little to sway her contemporaries. But she stood her ground, and once inducted, Preeti Lata played an important role even in the Chittagong uprising. Born on 5th May 1911 in a middle-class family at Dhalghat village in Chittagong, which is now a part of Bangladesh, her father, Jagabandhu Vadedar, was a clerk in the municipal office in Chittagong, and her mother, Pratibha Devi, was a homemaker. She had 5 other siblings. In a limited salary, the family barely managed to meet their ends meet. Despite financial difficulties, Jagabandhu Vadedar provided the best possible education to his daughter. Preeti Lata was a bright student who studied at Kashtagir Girls' School and earned numerous awards and scholarships. Her academic accomplishments were put aside as she actively took part in freedom struggle from the very early age. Her role model since childhood was Rani of Jhansi, whose story she had read in school. The war at Jhansi had a deep impression on the mind of young Preeti Lata, whose innate desire was to free the country from the British rule. She associated with semi-revolutionary group and became a member of Dipali Sangha, which was established by Leela Nag, a revolutionary who advocated for women's rights and education. In Dipali Sangha, Preeti Lata received training in martial arts, self-defense, and was taught how to make bombs and use arms. When she was a student of class 8, she witnessed the imprisonment of Surya Sen by the British police on charges of looting a rail. Witnessing oppression at the hands of British, she started collecting books on revolutionary philosophy and read biographies of very many revolutionary leaders. Preeti Lata completed her matriculation in 1927 from Eden College in Dhaka, followed by intermediate in 1929, where she secured first rank in the Dhaka board. She pursued her graduation in philosophy from Bethune College, Calcutta, where she came in contact with Kalpana Dutt and Nalini Pai. Around this period, Preeti Lata's father lost his job, and the responsibility of the family fell on her shoulder. As Preeti Lata's association with the revolutionaries was known to the British authorities, her degree was withheld on government orders. Many decades later, on 22nd March 2012, her degree was posthumously awarded by the University of Calcutta. After returning to Chittagong, Preeti Lata joined Nandan Karan Aparna Charan, a local English medium secondary school, as its first headmistress. In June 1932, Preeti Lata met the firebrand revolutionary leader Surya Sen, who was popularly known as Master Da. She requested Master Da to allow her entry as a teenage revolutionary, but many freedom fighters raised objections to women joining their movement. Upon observing Preeti Lata's dedication, intelligence, and strategic planning, Surya Sen allowed her to become a comrade in the underground group. He felt that a women's brigade would be helpful in transporting weapons, as they would not attract immediate suspicion by the British intelligence. She played an important role in supporting the armory raid and attacks at the telegraph and telephone office, the reserve police line, and the railway line. In fact, Preeti Lata was one of the principal conspirators during the Chittagong uprising. She cleverly pieced together a strategy which helped Master Da and his fellows. She took the responsibility of supplying explosives to the revolutionaries for the Jalalabad battle. The decision of letting Preeti Lata into the group was later appreciated by all as they discovered her devotion to the cause of freedom, coupled with her ability to carry out assignments undetected by the British police. To avenge the killings of innocents, revolutionaries at Jalalabad, their friends planned to assassinate Craig, Inspector General of Police in Chittagong. The weapons for the assassination bid were supplied by Preeti Lata to the revolutionaries. But in a case of mistaken identity, Ramakrishna Biswas and Kalipada Chakravarti killed the superintendent of police of Chandpur and Traini Mukherjee. Both Ramakrishna Biswas and Kalipada Chakravarti were arrested on 2nd December 1931 and tried in the court. Ramakrishna Biswas was given death sentence while Kalipada Chakravarti was deported to cellular jail in Port Blair at Andaman. As family and friends of Ramakrishna Biswas lacked money to visit him while he awaited execution, Preeti Lata was directed to meet him regularly in Alipur jail. Preeti Lata met Ramakrishna over 40 times as his sister. The long discussion with Ramakrishna left a huge impression on Preeti Lata's mind. She developed revolutionary ideas. She gave up Gandhiji's idea of non-cooperation and took to arms to gain freedom from the British. To avenge the death of innocent Indians at Jalalabad, Mastada plotted to attack Paharthali European Club, which symbolized British supremacy. This particular club was chosen because it had the signboard, "Dogs and Indians are not allowed." It was decided to attack the club and torch it. Preeti Lata was selected to lead the team of 15 people for the attack. Preeti Lata was sent to Kotawali seaside to get trained in arms so that the plan could be properly executed. All members of the group were given potassium cyanide, which they were to consume if caught any time before, during or after the attack. On 23rd September 1932, the D-Day arrived. Preeti Lata led the gang. She had dressed up as a man. She was unrecognizable. While her associates Mahendra Chaudhary, Sushil Dey, Panna Sen wore lungis and shirts. The attack commenced at 10:45 in the night. For the attack, the revolutionaries divided themselves into 3 separate groups. Preeti Lata succeeded in laying the siege. While the gang barged into the club, the team torched the club. Thereafter, with 40 people inside the club, a fierce gun battle ensued. Some of the people present inside the club were police officers. They were quick to retaliate. Police officers picked up their guns and started shooting. Preeti Lata and her gang was chased and ambushed by the British. Preeti Lata sustained an injury and was shot on the leg. Upon realizing there was no way to escape except for surrender to the British, she opened a diversion for her comrades. Preeti Lata commanded her fellow fighters to escape. To avoid arrest, she swallowed cyanide and made the ultimate sacrifice. She refused to be caught by the British. Her body was recovered by the police the next day. On searching the dead, the police found few leaflets, photograph of Ramakrishna Biswas, bullets, whistle and draft plan to the attack. According to the post-mortem report, it was found that the bullet injury was not serious and cyanide was the cause of death. In the attack, 1 woman lost her life while 11 others were injured. Preeti Lata was only 21 years at the time of her death. She is the first woman of Bengal who sacrificed her life to free the country. Preeti Lata is remembered as an inspirational young woman who showed no fear in the face of adversity. A plaque stands in the memory of Preeti Lata at the spot she committed suicide. Even today, a few schools are named after her in Bangladesh. Chittagong has a road in her name. In 2012, a bronze sculpture was erected in front of the school where she taught, which is adjacent to the European Club. Preeti Lata till date is remembered as the Iron Lady of Bengal who chose to kill herself, then surrender to the British following a blood-stained encounter. 32 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत कहानी।
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां। मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaskar. Long time ago there was a brave commander called Koili who came from Dalit community and was fondly addressed by many as Veeratallapati or the brave commander. Some refer to her as Veera Mangai or the brave woman. She was a valiant warrior who belonged to the scheduled caste of Arunathayar. Koili was born in 18th century at Kudanchavadi near Sivgangai district to Periyamuthun and Raku, who worked in the fields. Her mother Raku was well known for her prowess. Koili's mother died protecting the fields from wild bulls. The sudden painful death shattered her family, so Koili's father, Periyamuthun, decided to move to another place near Shivgangai with her, where he worked as a cobbler. Koili was raised by her father, and she grew up listening to the stories of her mother, who pursued plenty of courageous acts in her past. Hearing them, she got inspired and she wanted to be like her. One day, as Periyamuthun was on his way to work on the streets located near the palace of Queen Velu Nachiyar, the guards called him inside the palace to serve Queen's order for cleaning the shoes of the Queen and her staff. The Queen was very happy at his work, so she thought to reward him with extra money. Periyamuthun was then called by her staff. After some time, looking at his sincerity and honesty towards the Queen, Velu Nachiyar turned him into her spy. It is not known to many that in 1730 to 1796, Velu Nachiyar, the Queen of Shivagangai, was the first ruler in the Indian history to wage a war against the British colonizer, and it is believed to be the first war of independence against the British that took place in the Indian history. What is perhaps even lesser known is that the strategy that helped her to win was devised and played out by Koili, her commander-in-chief. Though hardly ever recognized or acknowledged for it, but Koili played an important role in shaping the history of India. Due to the nature of work that Koili's father had, Periyamuthun was unrestrictedly allowed access to Velu Nachiyar at all times. Soon Koili was also getting closer to the Queen as one of her trusted people. Soon Koili found a special place in the heart of the exiled Queen. During her stay with the Queen, she was made to learn various forms of man-to-man combats. She also learned fighting with spears and sticks. She was good in hand-to-hand combat, and it was noticed by many that she was a fierce fighter. Soon thereafter, a few incidents followed that made her extremely trustworthy to Velu Nachiyar. Koili saved her life on more than one occasion. One day, an intruder entered the Queen's palace in order to assassinate her in her sleep. Everybody was unaware of a factor that Koili was lying asleep in the Queen's room distantly. Suddenly, a weird sound woke her up, and she saw the intruder approaching the Queen with a knife. Koili immediately saved her life by almost killing the intruder and got badly injured in the fight. On witnessing this, Velu Nachiyar incessantly tore a piece of her sari to bandage Koili's deep wounds. A few months later, Koili discovered that her own Silambam, meaning a weapon-based martial art, teacher was a spy working against the Queen and leaking information to unknown sources. On learning this, without a second thought, Koili immediately ended his life, sensing the danger that he could cause Velu Nachiyar. This led to the Queen making Koili her personal bodyguard. That time, the British atrocities were on the rise and they overthrew the Queen. Velu Nachiyar went into hiding to save herself from the British oppression. That time, Koili and her father fought together for the Queen. The British caught Koili and coerced her into revealing Velu Nachiyar's plan, but she valiantly refused. As a result of which they tormented her community by committing various atrocities on Dalits. Later on, to aid Koili's resistance, Velu Nachiyar made her the commander-in-chief of the women's army. Soon it was understood that it might get difficult to win her kingdom back from the ruthless British, so they worked on getting alliances from other emperors. On successfully creating alliance, Velu Nachiyar entered into war with the British in order to reclaim her kingdom. Though her armies were well trained and had won a few battles, they faced a lot of difficulties due to the advanced weapons that was being used by the British army. This is when Coily formulated a strategy to cause the British a huge agony and loss. She worked on gathering information about women being allowed into the Sivagangai fort, which was against the norm. But it was the 10th day of Navratri, when women across the kingdom were allowed inside in order to celebrate Vijayadashmi festival, which was celebrated inside the temple of Raja Rajeshwari Amman. Without delay, Coily took advantage of this golden opportunity and planned a surprise attack on the British. She led her army, who were dressed as civilians, and got inside unnoticed by the British army who were swarming around the fort. Having hidden the weapons inside the flour and fruit baskets, the women entered the fort, and on the Queen's cue, they had launched a surprise attack on the British. The British army was taken by surprise and was forced into a battle that they were completely unprepared for. They killed and severely injured many British officers. Coily had already made note of the location of the storage area where the weapons were hidden. She formulated another plan. Coily cleverly made use of the chaotic environment and made her comrades pour ghee and oil all over her that were kept for burning of the lamps. She then went inside the storage area and set herself ablaze. She destroyed all the weapons and left the British army completely vulnerable. Her bravery and brilliance allowed Velu Nachiyar to not only win the battle but also reclaim her fort and her kingdom. Coily's sacrifices will always be remembered. She is considered to be the first suicide bomber and women martyr in the Indian history. To honor Coily, the Tamil Nadu government erected a memorial to Coily in Sivagangai district in Tamil Nadu. Coily was a courageous fighter and she fought for her motherland valiantly. The following lines describe her life. If yet your blood does not rage, then it is water that flows in your veins. For what is the use of your youth if it is not for the service of motherland? Chandrasekhar Azad said this, and we dedicate this to the life of Coily. 31 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaskar. Each day we are inching closer to the historic 75th Independence Day of our country. Till now, I brought you stories of unsung heroes, but today I bring to you a story which many of us may already be aware of. But there are so many facets which are less known or unknown for many, many decades. This story is about great Bipin Chandra Pal. On 7th November in the year 1858, this Indian revolutionary was born in a Hindu-Bengali caste family to Ramachandra Pal, a Persian scholar and a small landowner in Poil village in Sylhet district, which is presently Bangladesh. He studied at the St. Paul's Cathedral Mission College, affiliated to University of Calcutta. Later, Pal started to work as a headmaster. After some time, he became a librarian of a public library. It was there when he met several political leaders like Surendranath Banerjee, Shivanath Shastri and B.K. Goswami, and Pal got highly inspired by their views of nationalism. He also studied comparative theology for a few years at New Manchester College, located in Oxford in England. But somehow, could not finish the course. Bipin Chandra Pal is known as the father of revolutionary thoughts in India. He was known for his versatile and assertive nature. He had a mind of his own and followed his own principles, for which he had to suffer a lot in life. Unfortunately, his first wife passed away, but later he remarried a widow and joined the Brahmo Samaj. But he had to sever all ties with his families because of his remarriage to a widow, which was not seen positively during that era. After coming back to India from Oxford within a year, Pal had been witnessing the rise of British tyranny, and with each day passing by, he became furious at the atrocities, and without any further ado, Pal plunged into the freedom struggle. He initially started by preaching the idea of Swaraj among the local Indians. He meticulously used his profession of journalism in spreading patriotic awareness amongst the people. He was known as an eminent radical of his time. Pal started the path of revolutionary writing that inspired many to take up the path of confronting the British Empire through armed resistance. He published several journals, weekly, and many books to spread Swaraj or independence. He brought revolution in the minds of the citizens by writing prominent books like Nationality and Empire, Indian Nationalism, The Basis of Social Reform, The Soul of India, Swaraj and the Present Situation, The Hinduism and the New Spirit. He was also the editor of many critical fact-oriented papers like Democrat, The Independent, and many other journals. He also started journals like Paridarsak, New India, Bande Mataram, and Swaraj. His fearless writings reached the lakhs of minds during the British rule that helped in our freedom struggle. Later he met eminent revolutionaries like Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Aurobindo Ghosh. He kept meeting them and was enormously inspired by their interactions. Soon thereafter, the triad, along with Aurobindo Ghosh, devised a new national movement and named it as Purna Swaraj, preaching an extremist form of nationalism that espoused revolutionary techniques like boycotting British goods and shops, burning Western clothes, as well as advocating strikes and lockouts against the British factories, boycotting British-style education and embracing Swadeshi education system. These measures were taken to eradicate poverty and unemployment as well. Soon this trio became popular as Lal Bal Pal. In 1905, Pal founded an English-language weekly newspaper published from Calcutta and named it as Bande Mataram. The responsibility of editing was later given to Sri Aurobindo Ghosh. Agitated against the partition of Bengal, Pal and many revolutionaries wrote numerous articles and columns against it. He also participated in the protest named as Bango Bhango Andolan or Bengal Division Protest by writing about it dauntlessly. One day on the issue of Bande Mataram sedition case, the cold-blooded British turned up and questioned Pal about Sri Aurobindo, but he was adamant on keeping all information secret and boldly refused to give up any evidence against Sri Aurobindo to the British. Consequently, Bipin Chandra Pal was coerced and questioned ruthlessly, but he was arrested and was remaining quiet about the matter. Eventually, he was sentenced to 6 months of jail time. Bipin Pal's Bande Mataram was a unique journalistic history in the influence as it exercised in converting the minds of people and preparing it for revolution. Pal was gaining importance majorly as a political thinker who changed the thoughts of people by waging a war with a pen. Initially, Pal was a part of Congress party, but during his association of 6 years, he found out that he had no faith in mild protests in the form of non-cooperation with the British colonial government. He understood that it would be of no use if there is a will to free Bharatvarsh from barbarous British. On that one issue, the assertive nationalist leader discovered that he had nothing in common with the ideology of the Congress. Disillusioned by the approach of the party, he eventually secluded himself from them and ended his association. On witnessing Pal's activities, Sri Aurobindo Ghosh referred to him as one of the mightiest prophets of nationalism. Bipin Chandra Pal made significant amount of efforts to remove social and economic ills. Pal was also one of the pioneers who was disturbed by the prevailing caste system during the British rule. Thus he opposed valiantly. Moreover, Pal also went against the societal norms where widow remarriage was a taboo in the society then and openly advocated in favor of widow remarriage. This changed the viewpoint of many within the society. Even more, Pal advocated a 48-hour working week and demanded a hike in the wages of workers as there were discriminatory practices undertaken by the British. Not just limited to this, Bipin Chandra Pal was an ardent proponent of gender equality. Back then, the society had lots of taboos as well as outdated belief systems. Then women were not looked upon as an equal gender but a second-class citizen. This affected him a lot. Thus Pal, apart from rebelling against the British, he also fought for women and wrote and discussed much about gender equality as he had immense respect for the women of the country. He voluntarily retired from active politics in the year 1920 but continued to inspire the youth of the country by contributing to write in magazines till his last breath. He left us on May 20th, 1932 when he was 73 years old. Bipin Chandra Pal had inspired many minds and many lives back then, and because of his inspirational writings about freedom, several youths of India turned into revolutionaries who chose a path to fight for a free and independent country even after his death. He is one who pioneered the idea of Purna Swaraj and undertook Swadeshi as well as boycott movement. Even in the modern India, we are following the path shown by him, that is Atmanirbharta or self-reliance as well as Make in India. Let us remember these greats from our history in this 75th year of India's independence as we celebrate Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Just 30 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
The contribution of the northeastern part of India to our freedom struggle is exemplary. Today we will remember one of the revolutionaries from the land of seven sisters, the abode of clouds, Meghalaya. Many warriors from this land and this region laid down their lives for this great nation to be free from the British bondage. U Tirot Singh Siam or Tirot Singh was born in the year 1802. He belonged to Saimali clan and was the Siam or king Nongklo village in the Khasi region of Meghalaya. Long ago, during the 19th century, the British caused a great turbulence in the present northeastern part of India. During then, the cunning British government was ruling in Assam and they wanted to gain complete control over Brahmaputra Valley to rule the entire region. In those days, David Scott, an extremely ambitious officer, was appointed as the agent of the Governor General of the entire East Frontier, that is from the present-day Silchar in Assam to the present-day Sylhet in Bangladesh to Sikkim in the northern belt. He was also the Special Civil Commissioner of the Northeast, Rangpur, which is the present-day Golpada and Garo Hills, and judge of the circuit as well as appeal in Zilla of Sylhet. He was a cunning and ruthless British officer for which he was given extreme powers to capture the entire belt anyhow. The prime objective was to create a sound network of the British establishment that would open up newer avenues there. Scott initiated operations to open up a direct route of easy transportation and communications from the heavily concentrated forest areas of Assam right up to Surma Valley. That will in turn help them to save time traveling from malaria-infested jungle and also connect Bengal with rest of the region. there came trouble, as we know the route passes through Meghalaya. For that, they will need to gain control in that whole region as well. At least a written permission to construct a passage initially from the king of Nongklo was extremely important for the project. But that was not going to be easy, as there they all knew that U Tirot Singh was a tough ruler, for which the British thought to have a polite consultation with him at first before choosing any course of action of betrayal. So the British sent their political agent David Scott at first to have a detailed discussion and to seek permission for constructing a road cutting through the hills which belonged to the Khasis. During the discussion, Scott proposed that in lieu of this permission, Tirot Singh would be given full control of the Duars region that passes into Assam, and not only that, they also committed to allow free trade in the region to boost their economy to an extent. But the British were not that straight. They made a plan that once they construct the passage, they will change the game plan to something disastrous for Tirot. Tirot Singh called for an immediate consultation with the other chiefs of clans in the Darbar or court. It was during 1827. The Darbar went on for 2 to 3 days, where discussions were made and concerns were shared. Eventually, Tirot Singh did not want to give British any control, but wanted to expand the kingdom for the tribals in the region. So after consultation with his Darbar, Tirot Singh consented to the proposal of the British government and passed an order for the road construction that would start from Rani near Guwahati via Tirot's ruled region, Nongklo, to the Surma Valley. But severe complications started after 18 months of a peaceful road construction that started in Rani area near Guwahati. King of Rani region, Balram Singh, disputed Tirot Singh's possession of the Duars and claimed the region. Not only that, a Bengali peon passed on a crucial information about the ulterior motives of the British of levying heavy taxes on the locals for using that passage post-construction. It would be impossible for the local people to pay that huge sum. Both of these events enraged U Tirot Singh. He understood that the British are a threat to their nation and the innocent people. Tirot Singh went with a huge army of armed men in December 1828 to establish his claim against Balram Singh with the belief that the British would support him, but he was betrayed by them. Tirot Singh and his men were confronted by a party of armed sepoys who blocked his passage. When news came that the British were reinforcing forces in Assam against him, U Tirot Singh convened another Darbar again and immediately passed orders for the British to evacuate Nongklo. But the adamant British did not pay any heed to the order and they remained in their post. The British were bringing in reinforcement from Guwahati and Sylhet against him and his men. They wanted to capture or kill Tirot and his soldiers. Furious at the betrayal, Tirot Singh gathered his men from every corner of the region and motivated them to launch a war against the monstrous British. Tirot was highly concerned about the Khasis. When the Anglo-Khasi war started, they realized that the Khasis lacked sophisticated firearms and only possessed swords, shields, bows and arrows. They were not only unequipped but unschooled in the British style of advanced warfare. Soon it was also observed that it was impossible to engage in an open battle against an enemy who would kill from a distance. Therefore, meticulously, Tirot Singh resorted to guerrilla warfare tactics, and the war went on for about 4 years. Tirot Singh valiantly fought with native weapons skillfully, such as sword and shield. Their style of war killed and severely injured many British officials. But one day, suddenly he was shot at by the British. That injured him severely, for which he had no option but to run and hide in caves and tend to his wound. But the barbarous British did not stop here. They launched a search operation. One day, in January 1833, Tirot Singh's fate eventually failed him, as one of the chiefs spilled out about his whereabouts against a huge bribe by the British of gold coins. Tirot was captured and brutally tortured by the British. Later he was deported to Dhaka. It is believed that Tirot Singh passed away due to serious stomach ailments on 17 July 1835 in captivity. Tirot Singh is loved by not only the tribals, where he is a common household name, but by the nation for his prowess. He was not scared to face death. In his honor, the state of Meghalaya observes the 17th of July as U Tirot Singh Day every year. Let us recall the braves like U Tirot Singh in this Amrit Kal as we complete 75 years of India's independence. 29 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaskar. Today I bring to you the story of Veer Narayan Singh, who was known as the first freedom fighter of Chhattisgarh. He was a Gond landlord from Sonakhan in Chhattisgarh. He spearheaded the revolt of 1857 in the state. The ancestors of Veer Singh had very good relations with the public, including the tribal community of Chhattisgarh, particularly Sonakhan and Balod. In 1818, Ramsai, father of Veer Narayan Singh, picked up arms against the British to protect the interest of his people. But Captain Maxon suppressed the opposition. Veer Narayan Singh was born in the year 1795. After the death of his father in 1830, Veer Narayan Singh inherited the land and came to be known as a people's king. Young Veer Narayan Singh had the qualities similar to his father. Legend has it that once a tiger in Sonakhan had turned a man-eater. Veer Narayan Singh rode on his horse and single-handedly killed the tiger. Since then, Narayan Singh was titled Veer for the bravery he showed in defending his people from tiger. Veer Narayan Singh would often meet common people, listen to their problems and find solutions. He was opposed to the merger of the state with the English. This view of Veer Narayan Singh was not taken kindly by Elliot, the Deputy Commissioner of Raipur. Veer Narayan Singh disliked the British and the feudal lords who extorted money in the form of taxes from the peasants. In the year 1856, Chhattisgarh was hit by a terrible drought. People in the area were dying of hunger. Veer Narayan commanded great popularity among his people. He distributed all the grain he possessed among his people, but that was not sufficient to meet the hunger pangs of the people residing in the regions. So he requested Makhan, a warehouse merchant, to supply the grains available with him. He assured the merchant that full payment would be made to him for the produce over a period of time. But Makhan was looking for bigger profit, and he wanted to wait longer to sell the grain at a much higher price. Makhan therefore refused to distribute the grain. Veer Narayan, determined not to let his people die of hunger, pleaded to the merchant for the supply, but Makhan refused to relent. In retaliation, Veer Narayan, accompanied by thousands of peasants, attacked the warehouse of Makhan, seized the stock and distributed it among the hungry people. Makhan went and lodged a complaint with the British. A case of looting the granary was registered. Upon hearing the complaint, Veer Narayan left Sonakhan for Kurapat Dongri and turned it into his abode. Kurapat God is the god of Bijapar kingdom. Smith was waiting for such an opportunity. Using the complaint by Makhan, the British, with the support of the feudal lords, especially the Zamidar of Devari, who was the brother-in-law of Veer Narayan, arrested him on 24th October 1856 at Sambalpur. Despite the prison being heavily guarded, public tried hard to rescue Veer Narayan by extending full support to him and his men. It was the time when revolt were taking place in different parts of the country. Nana Fadnavis was sending messages to principalities asking them to rebel against the British. The news of rebellion reached Raipur as well, garnering support from a few freedom fighters. A tunnel was dug inside the prison. Veer Narayan managed to escape from the prison with 3 companions on 28 August 1857. From Raipur, Veer Narayan headed straight to Sonakhan. Under extremely difficult conditions, Veer Narayan mobilized people in the hilly terrain of Sonakhan to form an army of 500 soldiers. Veer Narayan and his men have a tough time fighting the British. Smith was sent by the British to lead the attack and crush the tribal army led by Veer Narayan. The strategy of British was to approach the local community and gather information on the whereabouts of Veer Narayan. As public refused to divulge details about him out of love and respect for him, gruesome atrocities were inflicted on the local people. It is said that the British entered Sonakhan and set the whole city on fire. Veer Narayan continued to move from one place to another on his favorite horse. Veer Narayan was 60 years old at that time. Due to his age-old animosity with a few zamindars, Veer Narayan's whereabouts were leaked and the British arrested him once again in 1857. Few accounts tell that Veer Narayan Singh could not bear the pain given to the innocent people, so he allowed himself to be captured by the British. After arrest, Veer Narayan was taken to Raipur jail. On 10th December 1857, he was hanged in public at a chowk in Raipur on charges of spreading distress among people. The place is currently called Baluda Bazar. To make a spectacle at the rebellion and in order to create fear among the masses, the dead body of Veer Narayan was tied to a tank and blown into pieces in full public view. Thus ended the life of a great freedom fighter. Today, the statue of Veer Narayan Singh stands tall at the chowk where he was hanged. The pillar is called Jai Stambh. Veer Narayan Singh became the first martyr from Chhattisgarh. During the First War of Independence, state government has renamed the stadium at Raipur Shaheed Veer Narayan Singh International Cricket Stadium. The government of Chhattisgarh also started an award in the memory of Veer Narayan Singh. The award is given to individuals and organizations who have done exemplary work in creating awareness among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Veer Narayan Singh is remembered as a brave freedom fighter who picked up arms against the British when famine was a common phenomena and death due to hunger was normal. Fighting for the rights of peasants was unheard of. Long after the death of Veer Narayan Singh, the workers, miners and peasants marched under the green-red flag of Niyogi-led union, chanting from Veer Narayan Singh to Shaheed Bhagat Singh's "We all are one, we all are united." Let us recall these great unsung heroes in this 75th year of India's independence. Their invaluable contribution will be written in golden letters in the chronicles of our freedom struggle. 28 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaskar. Today I bring to you the story of the brave Naipal Singh Bahadur, who was considered the most dangerous spy by the British intelligence services. He was part of Secret Services of Indian National Army (INA) and spent many years in Singapore and Northeast India, especially Assam, Manipur and Meghalaya. Born into a Zamindar family on 12th August 1921 at Dokhati village in Balia, Uttar Pradesh, Nepal did his schooling in Ara, Bihar, where his father Raghunath Singh Solanki lived. Later, he joined the British Army and served as a special lieutenant. Nepal was unhappy seeing the treatment meted out to freedom fighters. He was inspired by the philosophies of revolutionaries and decided to give up services in the British Army. Hailing from a family of freedom fighters, the seed of nationalism was sown very early in his life. He decided to leave the British Army and join the intelligence service of Indian National Army (INA), led by Subhash Chandra Bose. Those were the times when many people were working hard to free the country from clutches of the British rule. Singapore and Japan had become a hub of revolutionary activities. Nepal was given the task to assist Subhash Chandra Bose in Singapore, where an uprising was being planned. A lot of undercover activities were undertaken from Singapore, as it happened to be the central place between India and Japan. Japan favored the freedom struggle in India as they gave the slogan Asia for Asiatics. Japanese were not in favor of European and British intrusion in Asia. India was an important subcontinent which was under British control. Therefore, it was important to free India from colonial rule. The work done by the brave revolutionaries in India, Singapore and Japan ultimately resulted in the clarion call made by Supremo of Azad Hind Fauj, Subhash Chandra Bose from Singapore, Dilli Chalo. Nepal was given the rank of captain in the INA. To avoid being detected by the British, he started an import-export agency by the name of Bharat Produce Company in partnership with Shiv Prasad Sharma. The two associates worked from their office situated at Moonstone Lane. The main job of INA comrades in Singapore was to garner support from international organizations and arrange funds which was required for military rebellion. Secret documents were kept in the custody of Nepal. The office served as a godown for storing arms and ammunition, which were later passed on to INA and revolutionary leaders. The office of Bharat Produce Company became a hideout for the freedom fighters who assembled there from time to time and held meetings on the pretext of buying and selling material for import or export. Nepal kept a very low profile, a very simple demeanor so that he and his place would not come under the radar of the British intelligence agency. Subhash Chandra Bose established the provincial government of Free India, and Azad Hind Fauj became the military arm of a government in exile. Civilians, people from rubber plantations in Myanmar were recruited into the INA. An all-women brigade was set up called the Rani of Jhansi Regiment. INA fought alongside the Japanese in Burma in 1944. Nepal undertook coveted operation into Manipur to guide the INA troops and draft a plan for the attack. INA troops were forced to retreat due to failing health of its soldiers and inadequate supplies of ration and arms. As Rangoon was captured in May 1945, Azad Hind Fauj surrendered. Subhash Chandra Bose was the target for the British for years, and many attempts were made on his life. On many occasions, Subhash Chandra Bose was saved by the clever eye of his bodyguards. But then came the news of the death of Subhash Chandra Bose in a plane crash at Taiwan while he was on his way to USSR. All these changes in military and political scene limited the activities of INA. By this time, India had gained independence. The British went all out to strike down the people associated with Subhash Chandra Bose so that no military uprising could be planned against the British. The British government was warned on holding trials against the INA, but it went ahead treating the revolutionaries as traitors. Shahnawaz Khan, Prem Sehgal and Gurbaksh Dhillon were jointly charged with murder, abetment to murder and waging war against the British government. A case was fought by Bhulabai Desai and barrister Tej Bahadur Sapru, with an impeccable defense arguing the actions of INA troops. The soldiers were exempt from Indian Penal Code and Indian Army Act. A number of witnesses were called to give evidence on the important role played by INA for attainment of freedom from the British rule. The plea was that INA's soldiers should not be treated as war criminals. Instead, they may be allowed to return to India as freedom fighters. The case was won in favor of revolutionaries. Nepal continued to live in Singapore under the disguise of a milkman. Britishers wanted to arrest him so that they could learn about the secret activities, get hold of classified documents, and learn about the death of Subhash Chandra Bose as it was shrouded in mystery. There were many details he knew about the travel plans of Subhash Chandra Bose, but chose to remain quiet. He was once heard saying that Subhash Chandra Bose traveled to Japan in submarine and not in the flight, which is contrary to the common belief that Subhash died in a plane crash on 18th August 1945. Nepal lived in Singapore till 1964. After many years, he returned to India and went back to his hometown in Patna and lived with his wife Sarojini Singh. For the daredevil services rendered, Nepal Singh Bahadur was honored with numerous medals. He continued to render selfless service in building the nation till his last breath. Let us recall the contribution of such a brave son of Bihar. In this Amrit Kal, 27 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी।
Hello friends, Namaskaram, Namaste. Today I bring to you a story from the Far East, the land of the dawn-lit mountains, that is Arunachal Pradesh. This story is about Matmur Jamo, who was the village headman of Yangrung village. He rose to prominence when he killed Noel Williamson, a British officer in the village of Unsung in Arunachal Pradesh, to protect his men's honor. Jamo belonged to the Adi or Abor tribe of Arunachal Pradesh. Abor was an ancient tribe which inhabited the dense jungles of Arunachal Pradesh. The Abors believed that their deities resided in their region and any and all strangers were prohibited from entering their territory. Nefa, now known as Arunachal Pradesh, was very strategic place vis-a-vis Tibet and China. The British therefore were very interested in taking over the region from the Pasai Ghat area. From 1850 onwards, the British waged many wars against the Abors to win their territory, but the Abors were fierce warriors and used the tough geographical terrain to their advantage. They managed to win 3 Anglo-Abor wars and keep their territory safe. The British, however, never gave up. They continued to send expedition after expedition to understand the area and win the village community over so that one day they could take over the region. Abors, however, detested the British not only because they wanted to take over their area, but also because of all the killings and damage they had caused over the years in various wars. A young British officer, Noel Williamson, who was an assistant political officer, was posted in Sadia. He set out for an expedition into the Abor territory accompanied by a small contingent of potters and guides. He gathered valuable information about the region and its people during this expedition. The contingent was returning to Sandhya when it got so dark that they decided to halt at Yangrung. When the officer asked his porters to prepare the meal, they found some rations missing. Williamson accused the Abor guides, whom they had employed to help them maneuver the terrain, of stealing. He personally slapped and assaulted the guides and threw them out of the camp. The Abor tribesmen were seething with anger and wanted to kill Williamson then and there, but they were not carrying any weapons while the British were well equipped, so the Abors left. Jamo, who was also from the Abor tribe and headman of Yangrung village, heard about the treatment meted out to the members of his tribe. He had also heard and seen his ancestors suffer at the hands of the British. He therefore took a vow at the time of avenge the humiliation of his people by killing the culprit. Jamo waited patiently for an opportunity when he would find Williamson in a vulnerable place and be able to take revenge. The Adi warriors waited and planned for a day when they could attack and restore their tribe's pride. After 2 years, on March 20th, 1911, Williamson, accompanied by Dr. Gregson, revisited Pasai Ghat. They were traveling as usual with their sepoys and coolies. Some of them got unwell, so the doctor had to stay back at the camp to look after them as Williamson continued with a smaller group to Unsung. Jamo's people were everywhere, and when they spotted Williamson and his contingent, they quickly sent word back. On receiving the information, Jamo gathered his young warriors from Kebnang, Pangi, and Season villages and decided to intercept the expedition. They received word that Williamson and Gregson had split into two parties. Jamo quickly made two groups. One was sent to Season and he himself went to Unsung. At Season, they found Gregson at the camp with the escort and porters, and Abor warriors killed them all. Jamo, with his band of 7 members, reached Unsung and attacked the British officer Williamson, killing him on March 31st, 1911. The British launched a massive hunt operation to find Abor warriors. 1,000 soldiers led by Major General Hamilton Bower were brought in to lead the Abor expedition of 1911. The British kept the hunt on for months. They kept closing in on the warriors, but Jamo and his members managed to give them the slip each time. This led to the 4th and last Anglo-Abor War. The British were brutal in their retaliation. They attacked the villages of Abor tribe. The Abor tribe with their ancient weapons were no match to the British. They assaulted the Abor tribesmen, burned down their villages, destroyed their crops, and even tortured the wife and son of Jamo. Learning about the atrocities meted out to his villagers and family, Jamo could not risk them any further. Jamo therefore, together with his members, surrendered themselves a few months later. Matur Jamo with Bapok, Jerang and Lomlo Darang were given life imprisonment and sent to cellular jail or Kalapani in Andaman, from where nothing was learnt about them even after India attained independence. They did not come out alive of the prison and no records were found of their whereabouts. Jamo and the Abor tribe had laid down their lives fighting to keep their independence. Jamo continues to be revered amongst his tribesmen for his supreme sacrifice. The Postal Department of Arunachal Pradesh released a special cover to commemorate the sacrifice of Matmur Jamo. The state also has the Matmur Jamo Memorial Ground at the Yangrung village named after him. The contribution of the unsung heroes like Matmur Jamo have been long neglected. Let us recall their sacrifice in this Amrit Kal. 26 days to go. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
भारत की कहानी
मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आजादी के लिए प्राणाहुति देने वाले 75 अनाम वीरों की 75 कहानियां मीनाक्षी लेखी की जुबानी। आप सुनेंगे अमृत महोत्सव पोर्टल पर 1 जून 2022 से रोजाना।